Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. Owning a diner had always been my dream. For nearly a decade, it was my second home. A small, charming place where neighbors gathered for breakfast. Travelers paused for a meal, and regulars lingered over their coffee. I loved the late nights, when the rush faded and I could sip a cup of tea while finishing the day's paperwork. But on one particular Thursday, the quiet comfort of my diner turned into something much darker. It was a slow evening. By 8:30 p.m., the dinner rush had already dwindled, and it was just Amy, my waitress Joe, the cook, and me, cleaning up and getting ready to close. The smell of grilled burgers still hung in the air, and the jukebox played softly in the corner. Amy wiped down the counters while Joe scrubbed the griddle. We laughed about Joe's bad poker streak last week, shared stories about our regulars, and played a guessing game about who might come in the next morning. It was an ordinary, uneventful night, until the bell over the door chimed. The three of us turned to see a man walk in. His appearance caught my attention immediately. He wore a worn-out jacket that was too big for him and jeans frayed at the hems. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Even so, he didn't seem threatening, just tired. "Just coffee," he muttered, dropping into a booth by the window. Amy looked at me. I nodded for her to take care of him. "Sure," she said brightly, grabbing a pot of coffee and a cup. He waved off the menu, saying he was waiting for someone to pick him up. Amy poured the coffee, and he wrapped his hands around the cup, staring outside without taking a single sip. By 10 p.m., he was still there. The coffee remained untouched, and he hadn't moved from his seat. Amy approached again, her usual friendliness beginning to waver. "Sir, do you need anything else? We're about to close." He glanced at her for barely a second and didn't respond, turning his eyes back to the dark parking lot. When 10:30 rolled around, Joe finished in the kitchen and poked his head out. "Want me to stick around, boss?" he asked, jerking a thumb toward the man. I shook my head. "No, I've got it. You and Amy can go." Amy shot me a worried look. "You sure? He gives me a weird vibe." I waved it off, trying to sound calm. "It's fine. He's just waiting for someone. He'll leave soon." They hesitated for a moment, then gathered their things and left, leaving me alone with him. By 11 p.m., my patience had run thin. I walked over to his booth, trying to sound firm, not confrontational. "Sir, we're closed. If your ride hasn't arrived, I can point you to a gas station up the road." He didn't look at me. "They're coming," he said flatly. Something in his tone rippled through me with unease. I flipped the sign from open to closed and started locking the doors. That's when his demeanor changed. "You're really going to lock me out?" he snapped, louder now. I turned, startled. "I'm sorry, but we're closed. You'll have to wait outside." He shot to his feet, towering over me. "You think you can take what's mine and get away with it?" My eyes widened, confused. "What are you talking about?" "You owe me," he shouted, slamming his fists on the table. My heart pounded as I backed toward the counter. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave now or I'll call the police." "Go ahead," he sneered. "Call them. They won't stop me." With trembling hands, I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. The operator picked up, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. "He's acting aggressively, and I'm alone in the diner," I whispered, so I wouldn't provoke him further. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are on their way." I kept the phone pressed so hard it hurt my hand. "He's still here," I murmured. "He's getting more aggressive." "Stay where you are and keep the door secured," she replied calmly. "Officers are en route." I locked myself in the kitchen, heart in my throat, and peeked through the small window in the door. The man wasn't pacing anymore. He had moved up to the counter. For a moment I thought he might leave, but then I saw him trying to open the cash register. When it wouldn't budge, his frustration exploded. "Come on," he yelled, pounding the counter with his fists. He tried to force it open with his bare hands, but the lock held. His fury escalated. He grabbed a nearby stool and hurled it across the diner. The crash made me flinch. Then his eyes fixed on the kitchen door. I felt my blood run cold as he strode over and began pounding on it with both fists. "You can't hide forever," he bellowed. "I'm going to get to you and you won't get away." The door shook with each blow and I backed up, keeping my eyes on the window. His face was inches from the glass, twisted with rage. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. The operator's voice cut through my panic. "Officers are almost there. Hold on a little longer." My hands were shaking, but I stayed silent, praying he wouldn't realize how flimsy the door actually was. Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed outside. The man froze, looking over his shoulder, and his demeanor shifted instantly. He bolted for the entrance and fumbled with the lock to escape. I held my breath at the screech of tires outside. The police arrived just as he stumbled out into the parking lot trying to run. 2 officers shouted at him to stop. He didn't. One tackled him while the other pulled out handcuffs and restrained him quickly. I watched through the kitchen window, relief mixing with exhaustion, then opened the door to meet the officers. "Are you okay?" one asked, concerned. I nodded, still shaking. "Yes, just nervous." "Do you know this individual?" he added, gesturing toward the squad car where the man handcuffed was hurling insults. "No," I replied. "He came in tonight and refused to leave." The officer explained that he had been causing trouble in the area. They had reports of thefts and aggressive behavior, usually targeting small businesses late at night. "You were lucky this ended without injuries," he said. Lucky. That word stuck with me as I looked around the diner, now strangely silent, except for the faint murmur of the police outside. The warm, familiar space I'd poured so much care into didn't feel the same, darker stained. The next day, I put a strict no-lingering policy in place near closing time, and since then, the 3 of us always leave together. No one stays alone at night. I won't let something like that happen again. I'm grateful I wasn't hurt, but the experience left a scar. I used to think of late-night diners as havens of comfort and safety, little bubbles of light in the dark. Now I know better, and I won't let my guard down again. Story 2. I had been working at the diner for about 6 months at the time. I kind of liked the job, and it was flexible enough to fit around my college classes. And well, it paid enough to keep my old Honda running. But that particular night, a shift that had started like any other, turned into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. The evening rush had died down, and I was settling into the rhythm of the late shift. I moved between tables, topping off coffee cups and balancing trays with burgers and fries. That's when I noticed him. He was sitting alone in a corner booth, hands gripping a cup of coffee. At first, he seemed like any other late-night customer. 40s, nothing remarkable, wearing a baseball cap. But as the night went on, I began to feel his gaze fixed on me. Every time I turned my head his way, he was watching. At first, I let it go. People look. It's part of the job. Only this wasn't the usual look. It wasn't the "I need a refill" or the "I'm bored and my eyes are drifting." It was intense, like he was studying me. When I went to check on him, he smiled with a thin, almost unnatural smirk and started asking questions. "You're going a mile a minute, huh?" he said. "Yeah, Fridays can get busy," I answered, trying to sound polite without getting too familiar. "Are you in school?" he asked, casual tone but sharp eyes. "Yes, I'm a student at the university," I blurted, and regretted it instantly. I didn't like how personal the conversation was getting. His eyes stayed locked on my face. Must be tough juggling work and school. "Yeah, it keeps me busy," I said, taking a step back. "Can I get you anything else?" "No, I'm good," he replied, widening his smile. "I'm just enjoying the view." His words and the way he said them threw me off, but I pushed it out of my mind. I had other tables to handle, and staying there any longer felt wrong. By midnight, the place was nearly empty and my shift was almost over. The man had left about an hour earlier, and I felt a small relief seeing his booth empty. I cleaned the tables, counted my tips, and clocked out. The parking lot was quiet. I got into my Honda, started the engine, and headed home, eager to collapse on the couch with a bowl of cereal and some late-night TV. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's a small town, and it's not unusual for someone to take the same route home. But when I turned onto a quieter street, the car stayed behind me. I turned again, this time onto a side road I don't usually take. The headlights followed. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe they were just going the same way. However, when I made another turn, one that reconnected with the main avenue, the car copied me again. I took a deep breath and started making a series of random turns, weaving through the neighborhood's sleeping streets. The car stuck with me at every turn, always keeping the same distance. By then, my pulse was hammering. Whoever it was wasn't just heading to the same place. They were following me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping my other hand on the wheel. 911, what's your emergency? I think someone is following me, I said. I just left work and this car has been behind me for 15 minutes, copying every turn I make. Where are you right now? The operator asked. I gave her my location, glancing nervously at the mirror. Keep driving, she instructed. Head to the police station. Officers will meet you there. I pressed the accelerator, fear pushing me to go faster. The car behind me didn't ease up. In fact, it seemed to be closing the distance, its headlights glaring in my mirrors. I took another sharp turn, tires screeching on the pavement. They turned too, their presence crushing my nerves. The operator stayed on the line. You're doing very well, she said. You're only a few blocks away. Finally, I saw the familiar brick building, bright floodlights and marked patrol cars out front. Relief washed over me as I pulled into the lot. The car that was following slowed as I approached the station, and just as I pulled into a space, it jerked around and sped off into the night. I jumped out, legs shaking, and walked toward the entrance. A couple of officers met me at the door. Are you okay? One asked. My hands were trembling. Yeah, but they're gone. They veered off as soon as I got here. The officers took my statement and assured me they'd keep an eye out for the vehicle. They asked for a description, but all I could offer was vague, dark-colored car, maybe a sedan. Getting home that night was one of the hardest things I've done. Any pair of headlights behind me felt like a threat. Every turn, a possible trap. I parked in the driveway, rushed inside, and double-checked every lock on doors and windows. For weeks after that, the unsettling feeling of being watched stuck with me. I started parking closer to the diner's door, obsessively checking my mirrors on the drive home, and avoiding late shifts whenever I could. Whoever that man was, whatever his intentions, he didn't just follow me into the neighborhood. He shook my sense of safety to its core. Story 3. I work as a manager at a diner, and every now and then, I take the night shift. Most nights were quiet, a chance for regulars to relax and for night owls to grab a bite. For me, it was also the perfect time to organize inventory while keeping an eye on the floor. I liked the calm of running the place at night. What I didn't like were the prank calls. They started about 3 months ago. At first, there was nothing unusual about them. Someone breathing heavily, laughing and hanging up. It happened at least once a week, always in the early hours, when the diner was nearly empty. I ignored it, assuming it was just some bored teenager or someone trying to get a reaction. But then the calls became more specific. "Are you alone tonight?" asked the voice in one call. It didn't sound loud or desperate. It was calm, steady. "Excuse me?" I said. The line went dead. I hung up and tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to another prank. However, as the weeks went by, the question became routine. Every 2 or 3 nights, the same voice would call and repeat the same thing. "Are you alone tonight?" I started having the staff answer the phone, but the caller seemed to know when it was me. If someone else picked up, they said nothing. The voice only spoke when I answered. One Friday night, the diner was quieter than usual. Only 2 customers remained. An older couple sharing a milkshake in a booth and a man sitting alone in the far corner. He had been there for over an hour, nursing a cup of coffee and barely touching the slice of pie in front of him. There was something about him that unsettled me. He wasn't doing anything particularly strange, but his presence made me uneasy. Then the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Main Street Diner, how can I help you?" "Are you alone tonight?" said the voice, as calm as ever. A chill ran through me. I scanned the room while responding. "Who is this?" The caller let out a faint chuckle. "Look to your left," they said. My heart stopped. Slowly, very slowly, I turned my head toward the corner where the man was sitting. He was staring directly at me, a thin smile spreading across his face. I froze, gripping the phone tightly. "Who are you?" I asked. The line went dead. The man's smile didn't fade. He didn't wave or speak, just kept smiling. I hung up and tried to compose myself. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he wasn't the one calling. But the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I walked over to the counter, pretending to check the coffee machine while keeping him in my peripheral vision. He was still watching. "Jess, you okay?" asked Brenda, one of my waitresses, coming out of the kitchen. I didn't want to alarm her. "Yeah, just a weird call. Can you keep an eye on table 6 for me?" Brenda glanced at the man and raised an eyebrow. "Sure. What's up with him?" "Nothing. Just let me know if he leaves." She gave me a skeptical look, nodded, and went back to wiping the counter. After a short while, the man stood up and headed for the restroom. I felt a flicker of relief, hoping he'd finally leave. But as he passed me, he stopped for a moment. "You should answer your phone," he said softly. I didn't respond. I watched him disappear into the restroom. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. "Main Street Diner," I answered, my voice slightly trembling. "You didn't ask if I'm still here," said the voice. I dropped the receiver instantly. "Brenda," I called out, my tone sharper now. "Call the police. Tell them we've got a suspicious person here." "What's going on?" she asked, eyes wide. "Just do it, please," I said firmly, leaving no room for debate. While Brenda phoned the police, I stood by the counter, eyes fixed on the restroom door, tense, waiting for him to burst out at any moment. But the door stayed eerily still. About 5 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Their presence was both comforting and unnerving. Brenda hung up and quickly explained the situation, pointing toward the restroom. One officer positioned himself near the door while the other called out, "Sir, we need you to come out." There was a pause, followed by the sound of footsteps inside. Slowly, the door creaked open, and the man stepped out. His demeanor was unsettlingly calm. Without saying a word, he allowed the officers to escort him outside to the sidewalk. I stood frozen behind the counter as they began questioning him. "Do you have identification?" one officer asked. The man shook his head. "Do you have a phone on you?" He patted his pockets theatrically, then held out his empty hands. "No." The officers searched him but found nothing. No phone, no wallet, nothing that explained who he was or why he was there. After a few minutes, they let him go with a warning to stay away from the diner. As he walked off into the darkness, he looked back. His expression was unreadable. A shiver ran through me, but I forced myself to focus as the officers turned back to take my statement. "Without ID or evidence of a crime, there's not much we can do," one said apologetically. "If he comes back, call us right away." It wasn't exactly comforting, but I thanked them before locking up for the night. The next morning, as I pulled into the diner's parking lot, something black near the restroom window caught my eye. I thought it was trash, but as I got closer, I saw it was a cell phone, cheap-looking with a cracked screen. Beside it were a pair of wireless earbuds, scratched and scuffed, as if they'd been dropped in a hurry. Then it hit me. The man must have tossed the phone and earbuds out the window before the police arrived to hide them. I picked up the items carefully, wrapping them in a napkin, and took them inside. Later that day, I handed the phone and earbuds over to the police. They confirmed it was a burner, a disposable phone likely untraceable. The earbuds didn't help either. No distinctive marks, no serial numbers, another dead end. Weeks later, I was still haunted by that night. Every time the phone rang after midnight, I braced myself, waiting to hear his voice. Whoever he was, he knew exactly how to get under my skin. And even though he never came back, at least as far as I know, the memory of his voice still lingers. I don't answer the phone anymore. The staff handles that now. Sometimes it's not the loud threats or obvious dangers that should worry you most, but those quiet, unsettling moments that cling to you long after they're over. Story 4. It was just another night shift at El Diner, the kind I had worked countless times. Our place wasn't fancy, a slightly worn spot on the edge of town where regulars lingered over coffee and pie, and truckers stopped in for a midnight burger. When the clock struck 12, the last customer had left and my closing routine was underway. I liked the stillness of closing up, the sounds of the night, the refrigerators humming, the fluorescent lights crackling, the occasional car passing outside. All of it helped ground me after a long shift. That night, everything seemed normal. I wiped down the counter and tables, swept the dining room, secured the cash register, and went over the end-of-day checklist on my clipboard. Locking up was muscle memory by then, so I headed toward the restrooms to finish wrapping up the night. As I approached the back hallway, a barely audible whisper caught my attention. It was a soft rasp, like fabric sliding over tile. The men's room door was cracked open. That was odd. I clearly remembered closing it earlier when I swept the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, stepping closer. My voice echoed down the tiled corridor, but there was no answer. The sound came again, and it wasn't just a rasp anymore. It was a murmur, low jumbled words I couldn't quite make out. I hesitated. Maybe someone had slipped in before I locked the front door. It wasn't unheard of. Sometimes people came in off the street looking for a warm place to sleep. Still, something felt different about this. I took a deep breath to steady myself and pushed the door open. The restroom was empty, except for a single closed stall at the back. "Hey, the diner's closed. You can't stay here." The murmuring stopped for a moment. Only a strange silence remained. I took another step. "Sir, do you need help?" Suddenly, the stall door jolted violently, as if someone had thrown their full weight against it. I jumped back. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. "Leave me alone," a man's voice growled. "I can't let them find me." The voice was rough, almost desperate. My stomach clenched as I realized this wasn't just someone looking for a place to crash. "Sir, the diner is closed," I repeated, forcing myself to stay calm. "If you need help, I can call someone." The door shuddered again, harder. The man started shouting, furious, disjointed words mixed with frantic babbling. I backed out of the restroom. Whatever this was, I didn't want to stick around to find out. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the restroom key. After one last glance inside to make sure the man wasn't coming out, I slammed the door and locked it from the outside. Once I was sure it was secured, I ran back to the counter and grabbed the phone. My fingers shook as I dialed 911. "This is Chris, the manager at El Diner," I said. "I've got a guy locked in the restroom. He's acting aggressively and refuses to come out." The operator's steady voice assured me that officers were already on their way and told me to keep a safe distance. Those 10 minutes felt endless. Every so often I heard the man inside, murmuring and at times slamming himself against the stall door. His voice swung between rage and fear, like he was arguing with someone I couldn't see. I stayed by the counter, eyes darting from the restroom to the entrance. My imagination ran wild. What if he broke down the door? What if he was armed? The diner started to feel less like my safe, familiar workplace and more like a trap. When I finally heard the sirens, I don't remember ever feeling more relieved. 2 officers came in, and their presence eased the tension immediately. "Where is he?" one asked. I pointed down the back hallway. "He's locked in the men's room. He's yelling and acting erratically." The officer's expression turned grave. I handed them the key. I didn't want to be anywhere near that stall when the man came out. The officers entered the restroom and approached the stall cautiously. One drew his baton while the other called out, "Sir, this is the police. We need you to step out of the stall with your hands where we can see them." For a moment there was nothing. Then the murmuring returned, more intense. The officer repeated the command, firm. Finally, the stall door creaked open and the man emerged. He was a mess, wild eyes and clothes that hadn't seen a washing machine in ages. "They're chasing me," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the officers. "They're everywhere." The officers exchanged a carefully neutral look before one gently guided him out of the restroom. "We're going to take you somewhere safe," he said. Once the man was in the squad car, one of the officers stayed behind to take my statement. "Do you know this individual?" "I've never seen him before," I replied. "He kept saying someone was following him." The officer nodded. "Sounds like he might be dealing with a mental health issue. We'll get him the help he needs." The explanation made sense, but it didn't comfort me much. The man's crazed eyes, that mix of desperation and menace, stuck with me long after they took him away. I skipped the rest of the routine that night. I locked everything at lightning speed and went home. It wasn't the fear that hit me hardest, but realizing how vulnerable I'd been without even noticing it. The next morning I called the owner and strongly recommended improving security. Locks for the restroom doors after hours, stronger exterior lighting, and maybe cameras around the building. The owner listened, and within a week the changes were in place. They helped a bit, but the unease didn't vanish completely. I still work nights, but I'm not as relaxed as I used to be. I keep my phone in my pocket at all times, double-check the locks before everyone leaves, and never walk into any area of the diner without announcing myself first. It isn't exactly fear. It's caution, the kind that settles into your body after you've seen how quickly a normal night can go sideways. I don't know who or what the man thought he was hiding from. Maybe it was all in his head, or maybe he was running from something real. Either way, he left me with an unsettling truth. Even the most familiar places don't always equal safe places. If these diner nightmares kept you hooked, give it a like and subscribe for more unsettling stories. What would you have done in these situations? Drop your ideas in the comments. I'm dying to read your survival tips. Share it with your fellow night owls. But maybe warn them to keep an eye on the restroom next time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next nightmare.